Aloha and welcome back to Live at the Legislature. I'm the Hawaii State Senate's Communications Director, Jesse Broder Van Dyke. Last week, the legislature adjourned for the year after a session that was interrupted several times in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Our guest this week to wrap everything up in our final episode of the year, coming to us live from Lihue, Kauai, is the President of the Senate, Ron Kouchi. Aloha, Senate President. How is Kauai this morning?
There was a little light rain earlier, but the sun's coming out and, living up to the wonderful song, Beautiful Kauai.
Last month, you joined the governor and the House Speaker and the mayors in announcing a plan to reopen tourism with pre-testing before tourists fly here. Due to the explosion of COVID-19 cases on the mainland, Governor Ige announced yesterday that the opening to tourism will be delayed until at least September 1st. What do you think about the governor's decision, and how do you think this will affect Kauai and the other islands?
Well, the missing part of the press coverage was always that our target is, but we will have to assess the conditions that are in place at the time. 2 months ago, when we started the discussions and the first result was opening up Inner Island, there was almost no positives in the state of Hawaii. We were in single digits and had a few days of zero statewide, and it wasn't so bad on the mainland. The mainland started to ramp up, and as we increased cases here in Hawaii, medical supplies became short for what we need to do testing, certainly changed our perspective. And having watched a lot of CNN over the last several months, Dr. Fauci's words still ring clear in that we don't control the calendar. The virus controls the calendar. And so I would just let everybody know for September 1st, it's the next targeted date, but it will depend on what's going on globally, and then certainly what is happening here locally to see what we can do. And then most importantly, I think listening to the interviews with the mayors yesterday and this morning on the morning news shows, the governor's press conference, having a digital platform to be able to track the data in real time for those who are in quarantine is going to be an effective tool that is not one that we would like to have and it would be good to have. It's one that we must have if we're going to reopen. This gives us some additional time to continue to work on the development of the digital platform, and hopefully by September 1st, it will be ready to go.
Among other things this session, the Senate worked to distribute hundreds of millions of dollars in federal CARES Act funding to help Hawaii families make it through the shutdown. You provided $230 million to provide additional support to people who lost their jobs due to the pandemic and are on unemployment insurance right now. As of now, the federal plus-up expires at the end of this month, but because of what the legislature did, there's going to be some additional relief to people.
So there'll be an extra $100 a week, and that's what we could afford to do, realizing people will need added assistance. The second thing that the majority leader didn't cover, because she did a great job in talking about a lot of the programs, but we also have that 50% of your rent or $500 a month, whichever is less. So that's another $100 million committed. What is really fantastic about what Chair Dela Cruz and Chair Luke did in that rental assistance program, everybody's focused on the person out of work and the challenges in making their monthly payments and taking care of their families. And, that's certainly critical, but somehow missing in the conversation. In Hawaii, we have a lot of people who invested by buying a second or third home, and they have a mortgage to pay to, continue their ownership. So when they can't collect rent, then how are they able to pay the banks? And this is a mechanism that helps the people who need the rental assistance, but also by ensuring that they have an ability to pay their rent, then they're able to get the money into the owner of the property, who can then make their payment to the bank. And so we get a double spin off of that $100 million investment in rental assistance. And then in the first special or short session, In May, we had deployed 175 million to the counties. The city and county had qualified outright for about 360 million. And so, on Oahu, they stood up that economic development office at the Blaisdell Center. There is assistance for small businesses in the county's money. On Kauai, Mayor Kawakami committed 2.25 or 2.5 million to mental health services provided by nonprofit groups, as well as domestic violence and abuse. 1.5 million for making Wi-Fi access available countywide or more available, and also in increasing the digital platform broadband capacity. And all of these things become important as we look at how do we reopen schools if distance learning is still a part of that plan. There were some gaps in people who weren't able to connect. And by partnering with the county, using the money they got, the money we have, and the private providers, we're hoping to really make sure that each student has access to the devices and the connectivity. More importantly, those devices and connectivity can be used for those families who, for many of these job applications, need to do it online. Also, one of the big opportunities that has come about through the pandemic is the rapid acceleration of transforming into telemedicine. And this will also really broaden the opportunities for families here in Hawaii to avail themselves of telemedicine. And we hope that that will wind up where you'll have not only better service, but have it in a more cost-effective way to continue to keep healthcare reasonable and affordable for our residents.
And speaking of rolling out technology, you recently announced the Kauai Education Technology Pilot Project, which you're working on with the Hawaii Executive Collaborative and the Chan Zuckerberg Foundation and another other nonprofits. How's that going so far?
Well, it's going great. And, we realized as we're heading into early May that there was not enough data to decide what to do. I saw that California state colleges were now going to be 100% distance learning in the fall, and what was going to happen to our students if we were in 100% distance learning situation. So with 100,000 from Hawaii Community Foundation to seed, 150 from the Chan Zuckerberg Foundation, 100 from Bank of Hawaii, 25,000 from First Hawaiian, Onuaola, 50,000 from the Atherton Foundation. My wife Joy and I donated 15,000. We just received word that Central Pacific Bank was going to make a contribution to the fund as well. It will allow us to buy devices, so every student in public school will have a device. It will allow us to get hotspots so that for those who don't have the internet access, they'll be able to have the access. And most importantly, this week, they are starting training 2 or 3 teachers in each of the schools. The 5 charter schools are looking to be rolled in, but to have them get the training to be better distance teachers. We had a lot of, a good percentage of one-to-one here on Kauai. Unfortunately, we were all structured in a way to deliver in-classroom instruction and not to do it by distance. And so, the training is critically important so that everyone can be effective. And the Department of Education plans to have a help desk so parents can call in who would need help. I, for one, am not very well versed in technology. So if I were to be working with my children, the help desk would be important to help me better understand everything that I have. And then for those families without that connectivity and device, we're not just teaching students, but we're really broadening the opportunity for the parents in that home as well.
Is this something you're looking to roll out to the other islands?
The 2 individuals who have helped me get the program off the ground are from Oahu. They have been in touch with complex area superintendents on Maui, on the Big Island, and they've been in discussions here or on Oahu. Micah Kane, the head of the Hawaii Community Foundation, has held money in reserve so they could provide seed money to assist any of the other complex areas that would like to move forward and replicate what we've been doing here on Kauai. And when we started this, it was clear that we wanted this to be a model that could be replicated throughout the state.
Well, this was definitely one of the most unique sessions in history with all the stops and starts due to COVID-19. We finally got through the end of the session last week with a number of bills and nominations passed. Any highlights that you want to go over today?
It's just, 2 years in a row that the confirmation process for cabinet members wound up being pretty contentious in the Senate. And as I mentioned on my closing remarks, there are normally blocks of votes in the Senate that get together, and that's how the organizations get created. A lot of it is based on, philosophy and where you'd like to see Hawaii going. But in the case of these nominees, there really were divisions among the various blocks, and it wound up being a real challenging time to navigate. But I am just really thankful that all of that didn't get in the way of the legislation that we were able to pass, and we were able to get the work for the people of Hawaii done. But we're hopeful, that coming into next year, that we're looking at some of these opportunities, like how do we expand telemedicine, roll that into reducing the cost of healthcare? How do we continue to work with local farmers producing food for our schools, our hospitals, and our prisons? We aren't going to have the visitor industry counts that we did. And so we need to supplant all of the produce that those restaurants and hotels were purchasing. And then clearly the other opportunity that's presented to us, there was much discussion as we came into session about over-tourism, carrying capacity, what can the infrastructure handle? And clearly, we've got the reset button. And this is a hard restart, in fact, not reset. And we've got the chance to try to redo it, and it's incumbent on us to do it right. And those are some of the real opportunities that have come out of the situation we face ourselves in. And I would just echo what the majority leader said. Continue to practice safe social distancing, hygiene, including washing your hands, sanitizer, use your mask. Again, your mask really protects other people from you. And so when you're not using the mask, you're really telling people that I don't hold you in high regard and I could care less about you. And we're really not a selfish culture. It's about ohana. And that's why I believe Hawaii has still had some of the lowest numbers in the country.
Absolutely. And we're not wearing our masks right now because we're both at home. But when we're at the Capitol last week, we're all wearing our masks, including you presided on the Senate floor with your mask on. There you go.
I've got a medical checkup right after this. I need to sit in my car. I need to wait for the text message to let me know that I can come in. It's the first time I'm going back to see my doctor for a non-essential procedure, so I'll get a chance to witness firsthand, some of the changes that they are making in trying to resume back to some semblance of normalcy.
We just have a couple minutes left, but the Senate is expected to come back into session later this year to work on a Supreme Court nomination.
Well, we're going to come back maybe in the third week of September for 10 judicial nominations. They are primarily district and family court, and I believe an intermediate court of appeals. And with the amount of candidates the Judicial Selection Commission needs to go through, what we're going to do is have another 10 before the end of the year. And in that second batch will be, the nominees to replace retiring Justice Pollack, who turned 70 a couple of weeks ago. And so, we'll see 20 judges before the end, and at least one intermediate court of appeals and one Supreme Court justice. The other thing that we would look at is, if the HEROES Act does pass in some form and we need to appropriate money, then we may see the House and Senate come back together and, at that point to make sure that that money gets out to the people who need it. We would be immediately coming back to resolve that.
So that's the Federal Heroes Act, right? We had the Federal
Yeah.
CARES Act, which we already distributed the money on, and we're kind of waiting for the United States Senate to pass the Heroes Act.
And then if, Majority Leader Belatti for the House wasn't clear, but the big difference is in March we recessed, which meant all bills pending were still active. We came back in May and we recessed, which meant all bills pending were still active. But last Friday we adjourned sine die, which said we are done. So all of the pending bills are no longer active. They have died for the year. So they would have to be reintroduced next year to be considered. So if we come back, we'd come back for specific items only, but all of those bills would no longer be in play that were pending the previous two times.
Well, thank you so much, Senate President, for joining us. Unfortunately, we're out of time. This is our last episode of the year, but we thank you so much to everyone who's been tuning in.
And we just want to say a quick mahalo on behalf of the Hawaii State Senate to Olelo for making this opportunity possible for us to talk directly to the people of Hawaii.
Absolutely. I came to them one day and said, can you please figure out a way we can do this show remotely? And they figured it out. And here we are still on the air. So thank you to everyone at Olelo. And thank you, Senate President. And thank you, everyone, for watching at home. Aloha.
Aloha.